Good day, Jose, and hello to all of your viewers to this critical virtual radio spectrum forum 2024. Before I begin, I would like to thank 5G Americas for inviting the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago to participate in this auspicious forum. I am Kurleigh Prescod, Executive Officer of Technology and Engineering at the National Regulator for the Telecommunications and Broadcasting Sectors, the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. And it is my absolute pleasure to be here this morning to discuss the path to 5G in Trinidad and Tobago. So this morning, the agenda we will go through, we'll start off with an overview of the Trinidad and Tobago market, recap of the regulatory framework that is used to support the adoption of 5G, the specific 5G framework that we've developed here in Trinidad and Tobago. We'll then move on to discuss the revised spectrum plan for public mobile telecommunication services. We will touch on the topic of 5G private networks. And before closing, we will recap challenges to 5G adoption that we're seeing here in Trinidad and Tobago. So as indicated, we provide a quick overview of the Trinidad and Tobago telecommunications market. The population of Trinidad and Tobago is 1.4 million people, comprising roughly 405,000 households. In terms of 3G coverage, we have measured 100% 3G coverage. So almost everywhere, or virtually everywhere in Trinidad and Tobago has access to 3G coverage. In terms of 4G LTE coverage, we are approaching 100%, not quite there yet. We're still at 95% 4G LTE coverage, but definite improvement month on month, year on year. In terms of broadband subscription, we have 96% of homes subscribed to broadband services, with over 400,000 broadband subscriptions currently in play. Our mobile penetration in Trinidad and Tobago is extremely high at 148%, which basically speaks to a number of subscribers having more than one subscription, more than one mobile subscription. And in terms of 5G deployments, we have a single micro deployment in one of our industrial estates, which has deployed 5G for fixed wireless access for corporate clients at that industrial estate. We now move on to speak about the regulatory framework that exists in Trinidad and Tobago to support 5G. We would have developed a 5G framework, which speaks to how we will accommodate a 5G in Trinidad and Tobago. Coming out of that 5G framework, one of the instruments under it would be the Public Mobile Telecommunication Services Spectrum Plan, which would be the spectrum that we've identified to support 5G adoption by our mobile operators. Another instrument under our 5G framework would be our Broadband Wireless Access Spectrum Plan, which speaks to the spectrum that would be used to support fixed wireless access and broadband wireless access services. And of course, we have our maximum permissible emission limits for radio frequency radiation to ensure the safe adoption and use of 5G here in Trinidad and Tobago. Providing a quick history on our 5G framework development, we would have commenced a pre-consultation back in December 2021 to get the feedback from our various stakeholders as to what needs to be addressed in the promotion of 5G. We have commenced a public consultation back in July 2022. So in July 2022, we would have issued a consultative document for the first round of public consultation. And coming out of that first round of consultation, we received comments from the operators here in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as 5G Americas, as the appropriate provisions and policies required to support 5G adoption. We would have then issued that consultative document for a second round of public consultation last year in February 2023. And we're happy to see we have gotten further comments from our operators and various stakeholders. And coming out of that second round of consultation, we would have finalized our 5G framework and have it approved by our board. And this framework was subsequently published in September 2023. So at this time, from a policy perspective, we have a finalized and approved 5G framework, which is publicly available for our stakeholders. In terms of the key policy statements of that 5G framework, we have identified various spectrum bands from low band to mid band to millimeter wave spectrum for 5G services. We would have spoken to our plan in terms of the upper C band, where there's a lot of interest for 5G services in other parts of the world. We would have said at this time, we're not able to allocate to identify the upper C band for 5G, as we have existing licensed users, as well as, we need to ensure we protect altimeter use for the aeronautical services. We would have spoken to our approach in terms of considering the upper 6 gigahertz band for mobile use, as opposed to licensed example unlicensed use. So we would have spoken to our considerations that we would adopt in deciding how to allocate the upper 6 gigahertz band. We would have spoken to our approach to awarding spectrum to existing mobile operators, as well as how we would assign spectrum for new use. And finally, we would have made comment on the need for incentives that the authority can consider. And in particular, we spoke about incentive based on quantum of spectrum use to promote the adoption of 5G deployments. So these are some of the policy initiatives that we have stipulated in our published 5G framework. Stemming out of the allocation of spectrum, when we spoke about the provisions of the 5G framework, we spoke about allocating spectrum for mobile services. So our next effort, once we finalize the 5G framework, was to begin the revision or the updating of our public mobile telecommunications services spectrum plan. That spectrum plan would have been last updated in 2017, version 4. With the finalization of our 5G framework and the identification of various bands for 5G services, we felt it necessary to update our spectrum plan for PMTS, for public mobile telecommunication services, to ensure we could accommodate any operator wishing to deploy 5G in Trinidad and Tobago. We have commenced a public consultation process in March of 2023. So the first round of public consultation started in March of 2023. We have issued a document for a second round of public consultation starting in January of this year, 2024, which ended in March of 2024. And coming out of that second round of public consultation, we received feedback from our mobile operators, as well as interested stakeholders. We would have gotten comments from 4 stakeholders in total. And coming out of those comments, we have revised and finalized that spectrum plan for public mobile telecommunication services. And we expect it to be approved in July and published in August of 2024. So interested stakeholders can look forward to seeing our revised, updated spectrum plan for public mobile telecommunication services to be published in 3 months. Well, in 2 months, because we're in June. This diagram sort of highlight the spectrum bands that would have been identified in that revised spectrum plan for mobile services. So this chart provides a full view of all of the various spectrum bands used for mobile across the world, separated into the low band spectrum, which is the spectrum below 1 gigahertz, the lower mid-band spectrum, which is that spectrum that goes up to 2.1 gigahertz, and the upper mid-band spectrum, which is that spectrum that starts from 2.3 gigahertz and goes up to 5 gigahertz. And what we have circled in red or highlighted would be those spectrum bands that we've allocated for public mobile telecommunication services here in Trinidad and Tobago. From a low band perspective, we've allocated the 850 megahertz band, which is commonly used in North America, and the APT 700 megahertz band, which is not the 700 megahertz band used in North America, but the 700 megahertz band that has been used in the APT markets as well as in Mexico. From a lower mid-band spectrum, you see we've identified two bands, the AWS Advanced Wireless Services band, which spans from 1.7 to 2.1 gigahertz. And we've also identified the 1900 megahertz band, which spans from 1.8 to 2 gigahertz. Both of those bands are widely used in North America, in US and Canada. And in terms of the upper mid-band spectrum, we've identified the 2.5 gigahertz band, more specifically 2.6 to 2.69 gigahertz, as well as the lower 3.5 gigahertz band, from 3.3 to 3.7 gigahertz for mobile use. As we spoke to under the 5G framework, we mentioned that the 3.7 to 4.2 gigahertz was not allocated for 5G use at this time because of existing incumbents. So that is reflected in the spectrum plan for public mobile telecommunications services. So the key aspects of the revised spectrum plan for public mobile telecommunications services, we have increased the spectrum allocated in the lower mid-band, 1900 megahertz advanced wireless services bands, to wider band assignments, normally referred to as band 25 and band 66. So the preliminary advanced wireless service band that was previously allocated spanned 45 megahertz of spectrum, full duplex, so 45 megahertz up, 45 megahertz down for advanced wireless services. That band has now been expanded to 70 megahertz full duplex. So that widened band has been identified in the revised spectrum plan for PMTS. We've also adopted a wider band for the 1900 megahertz band. So that has gone from 60 megahertz up, 60 megahertz down, to 65 megahertz up and down. So basically now we have up to 135 megahertz of lower mid-band spectrum available for our mobile operators. In the bands with similar propagation characteristics, we've introduced the notion of aggregate spectrum caps. So what we've done, we've grouped bands in proximity that have similar penetration and propagation performance criteria aspects or elements. We've introduced aggregate caps around those bands. And the purpose of those aggregate spectrum caps is to promote operators consolidating their spectrum into specific bands, as opposed to having smaller assignments across multiple bands. So in the case of the lower spectrum, the lower band spectrum for mobile, which includes the 700, the 850 megahertz, rather than considering each of those two bands individually, we've introduced an aggregate spectrum cap where operators can consolidate spectrum in one of the individual bands, rather than having to have small assignments in each band. Likewise, in the lower mid-band, we've introduced that concept of the aggregate spectrum caps as well, to allow our operator to consolidate the spectrum either in the 1900 or the advanced wireless service band, as opposed to having small assignments in each of the bands. And in the upper mid-band spectrum, the 2.5 and 3.5 gigahertz bands, we've created an aggregate spectrum cap across those bands as well. And by consolidating spectrum within bands, it allows for larger channel bandwidths. And this is the purpose of doing that, because the larger channel bandwidths promote more optimal performance of 5G technology. We've allocated more low band spectrum, 750 megahertz spectrum in those respective bands. So there were some blocks of spectrum that were previously reserved. Now we've made them available for mobile use. We would have indicated that spectrum will either be assigned either via direct assignment or via competitive licensing, based on the criteria for existing operators versus new operators. We would have added, as I mentioned earlier, we would have added the upper mid-band spectrum. So you'd have added 90 megahertz of 2.5 gigahertz spectrum, as well as 200 megahertz of lower 3.5 gigahertz spectrum from 3.2 to 3.65 gigahertz. And we would have deferred the millimeter wave spectrum bands for future use due to absence of demand at this time. At this time, our operators have not approached us expressing interest in these bands. So we would have not necessarily made allocations at this time for these bands. These graphics here provide additional justification as to why we are looking to allow operators to consolidate their spectrum within bands that have similar characteristics, as opposed to having small assignments in multiple similar bands. So as we see the graphic on the left, it speaks to lowering power consumption by user equipment by allowing the equipment to focus, for a particular operator to focus in one band, rather than having to spread, to look at multiple bands, for spectrum below 1 gigahertz or for spectrum between the advanced wireless services in 1900 megahertz band. So this will allow for more efficient and better performance of the user equipment, providing tangible benefits to consumers. It also speaks to a capacity loss, where by having to split spectrum across multiple similar bands, you actually lose capacity, from 2 to 15%. And this information is referenced from the GSA. So the approach is illustrated well on the graphic on the right, which speaks to, rather than having in band A and band B small assignments for 3 more operators in each band. And this, of course, these will be similar bands. These will be bands with similar characteristics. So, for example, all the spectrum bands below 1 gigahertz or the lower mid-band spectrum bands. We would allow an operator to basically consolidate spectrum in one of those bands. Yeah, right? So one of the bands below 1 gigahertz, one of the bands in the lower mid-band spectrum range, to achieve the benefits that are highlighted on the left-hand side, to optimize the capacity and to promote optimal user equipment power consumption use. So this is why we've introduced aggregate spectrum cap to allow operators to consolidate their spectrum within the bands across similar bands. What else are we seeing from the 5G world? We're seeing increased interest for private 5G networks, both from users and from potential providers of services. One of the bands we've seen, we've received interest would be band 53, which is called the 2.4 gigahertz S band. So we have received interest for supporting private networks, private LTE or 5G networks in standalone ancillary terrestrial component bands, such as band 53. So in response to that particular area of interest, we've commenced the first round of consultation, public consultation, on authorizing low-power standalone ancillary terrestrial component operation in the 2.4 gigahertz S band. So that consultation started in December 2023 and was completed in January 2024. We have received comments from 2 operators, one the interested party and 2 another interested onlooker. And we are scheduled to issue that particular consultative document for a second round of public consultation in August 2024, where we will publish the comments received, our responses, and the revised consultative document. So we are on track to issue that document for the second round of consultation in August 2024. Other bands that we are looking at for accommodation of 5G services, private networks, would be the 2.3 and 3.5 gigahertz bands. So in this regard, we propose to have further public consultation on the notion of DWA systems that may choose to use 5G in the future. And for private networks, we propose to have a consultation in the upcoming fiscal year, 2024-2025, which would speak to which spectrum bands beyond the band 53, 2.4 gigahertz S band, as I mentioned above, which bands can be used by potential entities seeking to either operate private networks and particularly deploy 5G services using those private networks. So now we touch on challenges that we're seeing to 5G adoption. Firstly, we've heard from our operators that the flattening of their mobile revenues limits their ability to invest into 5G. Though data usage increases, we hope that 5G is seen as an opportunity to manage that investment, so to reduce that investment by rather than deploying more sites to use 5G to manage that investment to accommodate the data usage, the growth of data usage. But our mobile operators have indicated that the limited growth in revenue has creates a challenge for them to invest. As I mentioned at the start of the presentation, the wide availability of broadband subscriptions, the wide penetration of broadband subscriptions in Trinidad and Tobago means that most homes already have a fixed broadband connection, whether from fiber to the home or HFC hybrid fiber coax. And then we also have low Earth orbit satellite broadband availability as of 2023. So, most homes already either have a subscription already or have access to subscription, ready access to subscription. So therefore, one of the business opportunities of 5G would be to provide fixed wireless access to homes that normally wouldn't have access. And that's not really the case here in Trinidad and Tobago, where we have a lot of homes already subscribing to fixed broadband or have access to low Earth orbit satellite availability, where fixed broadband is not available. So in that regard, that 5G opportunity does not exist here. We've also heard from our operators that have cited the widespread prevalent adoption of over-the-top services, OTT services, limiting their ability to invest into 5G. And they're currently, calling for various contributions by these OTT players that benefit from broadband networks to support the investment into advancing our broadband telecommunication networks here in Trinidad and Tobago. So that will be another development we'll continue to monitor. And finally, we've heard from our operators where they've said that any sort of incentives that can be introduced from a spectrum perspective, cost of spectrum perspective, would assist in them being able to accelerate the deployment of 5G. So that will be another area that we will continue to work with our operators as we look towards promoting the adoption of 5G here in Trinidad and Tobago. So in closing, we acknowledge that 5G adoption will advance connectivity, ICT connectivity in Trinidad and Tobago. We appreciate the benefits that advanced ICT connectivity will bring. We acknowledge that 5G adoption will support the digital transformation agenda, especially in some of the more advanced digital transformation areas, such as deployment of smart cities, adoption of artificial intelligence, and widespread use of Internet of Things, IoT, in our everyday way of life. So, and we see 5G will be a key element in that. What we recap today is that various spectrum bands have been and are being identified to accommodate and promote adoption of 5G by our telecommunications operators. And our spectrum plans that we're developing also will accommodate refarming of existing bands. So operators don't necessarily have to get new spectrum. They can reuse existing spectrum and spectrum consolidation approaches to deploy 5G in existing spectrum bands. And that brings us to an end to our presentation. We want to say thank you again to 5G Americas for allowing us to present our plans and ongoing work that supports 5G adoption. And we look forward to your feedback. Thank you.